Discover the sinister rules of a cursed asylum in Indiana, 7 terrifying secrets exposed. The night loomed over Elmsworth, wrapping the quaint suburb in a thick blanket of unease. Sarah Hargrove dragged her weary feet along the cracked pavement after another grueling shift at the diner. The silence felt like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. Her 2 small children lay asleep at home, safe yet far from untouched by the creeping dread that had begun to grip her heart. Flickering streetlights cast bizarre shadows around her, playing tricks on her already frayed nerves. Whispers of the old asylum on the town's edge echoed in her mind, stories of haunting laughter and the sinister presence that supposedly lingered within those crumbling walls. As she made her way past the neatly manicured lawns and homemade Halloween decorations, murmurs danced through the air like ominous whispers. The laughter of children that rang out during the day turned hollow at night. Glances from neighbors felt too sharp, too scrutinizing, as if they were hiding secrets beneath their warm smiles. Lately, her own son had begun speaking of a dark man who visited him in the night, an imagination that festered into a sobering terror in Sarah's mind. Each night she crept from room to room, her heart racing, half expecting to find him drawn into dreams spun too dark to confront. But the worst discovered was the night when Sarah's neighbor's child vanished, swirling the town into a frenzy of fear. Hadn't they all heard the rumors of children who disappeared into the yawning mouth of the asylum, only to never return? Trapped in her own echo chamber of dread, she sought answers that the town dismissed. Were the disappearances mere coincidences, or something worse? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the television flickering light against the walls, shadows dancing alongside her. Then a loud knock shattered the silence. It echoed too loudly. Her heart hammered as she instinctively turned her gaze to the door, trembling hands gripping the couch's edge. Laughter from her children. They were safe, they were warm. But then they faded into the oppressive stillness, leaving only the echo of that knock. When she opened the door, a chill ran down her spine. There stood a neighbor's child, covered in dirt, grime smudged across a face that should be happy with splashes of color from Halloween. Eyes void of childhood joy, it was a gaping emptiness that sent terror spiraling deep within. The child held out a twirled piece of yellowed paper, lips barely moving as they whispered, "You can never leave." When the night calls. Panic surged in Sarah's chest, every instinct screaming that her children weren't safe. The shadows around her seemed to grow, creeping in from the edges, as if refusing to let their secrets go. She felt the walls closing in, the unspoken rules of Elmsworth binding her closer to a sinister truth that connected her fate with the asylum's dark past. What was hidden in those crumbling stone walls? And were her neighbors an extension of the darkness that loomed over her precious children? With horror clenching her heart, Sarah stood frozen, knowing she was being pulled into an unseen web of terror. What would she uncover next? The child didn't move, eyes hollow and glassy, as if they stared right through her. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to slam the door shut, but the grip of fear held her still. "What do you mean?" she whispered, heart thundering in her chest. The child only leaned in closer, the terrible scent of damp earth wafting from them, and repeated, "You can never leave." When the night calls. A chill crept along Sarah's skin, every hair on her arm standing to attention as she took a reluctant step back. "Go home," she urged, rage fighting with terror. "Your parents are worried." But the child's gaze didn't waver. They raised the piece of paper, now barely discernible in the dim light, its edges frayed and yellowed like a forgotten promise. Her heart sank further. What if this was a nighttime game played by children? Or was this something darker? With trembling hands, she snatched the paper from the boy and unfolded it. The frantic scrawl sent bile creeping up her throat, find the darkness. Face the mirror. Where did you get this? She demanded, but the child only shook their head, a faint smile curling their lips. It was wrong. So wrong. She thought she would scream, but all that emerged was a curt gasp. The child turned and shuffled away, mimicking the damp dismal shuffle that had echoed through her mind on countless sleepless nights. In desperation, Sarah called after them, "Wait. What do you mean?" But they just kept walking, the dark enveloping them like a shroud. Her pulse raced, each thump demanding she follow, but dread rooted her in place. Did she dare step outside into the chilling embrace of the night? The very air seemed to pulse with warnings as she shut the door, plunging the home back into darkness. She could still feel the eyes of her two small children on her, sensing the tension radiating off her skin. They needed to know they were safe, but how? A sudden noise broke the haunting silence, a whisper, low and echoing through the halls. "Mommy!" Her breath caught. Jake's voice. It was faint, calling softly from the shadows where she had left him asleep. With trepidation, she crept down the hallway to his room. The door stood cracked, the flickering light of a far-off street lamp casting twisted shapes over the walls. As she pushed the door open, her heart sank even lower. Jake sat upright in bed, blankets twisted around him like they were trying to hold him down. Fear rippled across his small face, and he pointed to the corner of the room, trembling. "He's here, Mommy." The dark man panic flooded her senses. "What do you mean?" She pressed, desperately trying to understand through her own rising hysteria. But before Jake could answer, a floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around, cold terror pooling in her stomach. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and dark, its shape unnatural against the dim light. It moved slowly, gliding toward her with an otherworldly grace. Sarah's breath quickened, her body frozen in place. "No! Get away!" She shouted, her voice shaky as she reached for whatever she could find, desperation giving her strength, but the figure stopped. It lifted its head, revealing a face twisted in sorrow and rage, features melting in and out of the shadows of children she recognized, of the neighbor's child, of the ghosts whispering through Elmsworth. It spoke softly, voice a cruel caress. "You have something that belongs to us." Her mind raced. What could it mean? Something about the asylum's darkness felt too warm against her chest, as if it were a secret she had forgotten, yet it loomed, waiting for her reckoning. Sarah's instincts screamed for her to flee, but her feet held her captive. In one motion, she thrust herself between her son and the advancing figure, heart pounding like a drum. "Leave him alone. You can't have him." Then silence fell, a stillness so complete it pressed on her ears. The shadows retreated as the figure paused, and for a brief moment, a flicker of hesitation crossed its face. What lay beyond those haunting eyes? "Find me before night breaks," it whispered, fading into the darkness with the chilling certainty of a tide drawn back, leaving them in overwhelming silence. Sarah turned to Jake, his wide eyes swallowing her whole, terror was etched on his small features. She knew she had no choice anymore. Whatever darkness infested this town was calling for her, and as night swallowed the world around them, there would be no rest. What secrets awaited her at the asylum? And what would she uncover before it was too late? The moment Sarah's heart settled into a rhythm again, the whispering dread returned, dancing on the edges of her thoughts. Find me before night breaks. What did it want? Questions swirled in her mind like a tempest, but she had no answers. Only the startling reality of her child, eyes wide with fear. She backed away slowly, feeling Jake's small, warm hand slip into hers. "Mommy, make it go away," he pleaded, his voice a fragile thread, quivering in the gloom. "Shoo, it's okay, baby. Just, let us get you back to sleep," she murmured, guiding him away from the corner of the room where shadows still flickered. Her heart raced with every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the house. Sarah tucked Jake back into bed, heavy blankets cocooning him. He needed comfort, he needed to feel safe. She sank down beside him, wrapping her arms around his small frame. It was shaky and fragile, like porcelain. She sang a lullaby, the words spilling from her lips like an incantation, hoping they would ward off the darkness threatening to engulf them. But with every note, dread gnawed at her insides. As she glanced toward the door, panic flared again. The silence was suffocating, it pressed against her ears like underwater sounds, drowning her in unease. Just when she thought they would be safe, another noise, a knock, deliberate and slow, echoed through the house, thrumming with malice. "Mommy?" Jake's voice slipped out in a whisper, his small fingers tightening around her wrist. Sarah's heart dropped. No one else was supposed to be here. The sound came again, a solid thump that seemed to resonate through the very walls. She swallowed hard, torn between wanting to confront whatever horror lurked to protect her son, and the icy grip of terror that froze her in place. "Stay here," she whispered, forcing herself to release his grip and standing to move toward the door. Each step felt as though she were wading through molasses. The knock was insistent now, shifting from hollow thumps to a desperate pounding. "Let me in." A voice called from the other side, muffled and desperate. It sounded familiar, yet twisted. It was a voice she had once known, but this time it crawled with a sinister tone, sending chills down her spine. "Who is it?" she managed, each word trembling in her throat. "Open the door, Sarah. I need help." The voice sliced through her fear, a plea sown with urgency. It was her best friend from college, Lisa, who vanished last year while helping in an investigation at the asylum. The shiver down her spine reeked of the past, but then came a realization. "What happened to you? You're not like the other, please. There's no time. You have to believe me." Panic now flooded the voice, intertwining with her memories. Her heart ached at the thought of Lisa, even as threads of dread wove around her gut. "Mommy, please don't open it," Jake urged, voice barely a breath. But the temptation to know, to find answers swelled within her like a storm about to spill over. "Stay back, Jake." She took a shaky breath, her hand hovering over the door knob, the cold metal biting at her skin. Somehow, the ties of the past and the pull of the present twisted together. She finally twisted the knob, the door creaking open, revealing an abyss. Then, a figure stumbled inside. Lisa, skinnier than Sarah remembered, faces marred by fear and soot. The shadows clung to her like an old coat, eyes hollow, pleading. "Sarah, you're in danger. We all are. The asylum is never done with us." Before she could respond, the new chill in the air intensified, and behind Lisa, shadowy figures peered from the hallway. "Run!" Jake shouted, but it was too late. Darkness enveloped them once again, as the walls echoed with laughter that chilled the blood in Sarah's veins. What horrors awaited them in the twisted paths of Elisa's words? And why did the darkness laugh? The darkness was a living thing, wrapping around them, choking out the last slivers of light. Lisa's eyes darted, frantic. "They're coming!" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper now. Sarah's heart thundered as she turned to Jake, who was wide-eyed, frozen in fear. "We have to get out," she urged, gripping his small hand tightly. "They would not be trapped here. Not like this." But Lisa was already shaking her head. "It doesn't work that way. If you leave now, you're giving them what they want." "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded, panic rising like bile in her throat. "Once they see you, they won't stop. You have to hide. You have to listen." Lisa's voice rose, desperation spilling over, but all Sarah could hear was the sneering laughter echoing off the walls, curling around her like smoke. "Where?" Sarah shouted. The house was closing in, shadows looming, crawling with figures she could almost see but dared not focus on. A blend of visions flickered, things from her nightmares, calls from her past, voices she thought she had buried. "What do I do?" Lisa took a step closer, her features sharpening under the dim light. "You must find the book. The Asylum's journal. It tells the secrets. It shows you how to break free." "Where?" Jake whispered, looking terrified. "The basement, but you need to be careful." Before Sarah could respond, the laughter warped into screams, high-pitched and piercing, echoing through the corridors of the house. It froze her blood. "We can't. Not there." She objected, instincts flaring, telling her to flee. But Lisa insisted. "It's the only way. They'll come for you if you stay." Sarah glanced over her shoulder, feeling pressure build in her chest. The shadows shifted, darker and more defined. She could almost make out severed faces grinning and beckoning. "Jake, stay close to me," she ordered. Without waiting for a reply, Sarah led them toward the hallway, breathing heavily, each creak of the floor feeling like a countdown. As the door to the basement loomed ahead, she hesitated. An icy draft slipped through, fanning the hairs on her skin. "Do we have to?" Jake's voice trembled. "Yes, we have to," Sarah answered, but it felt like a lie, even to her own ears. With shaking fingers, she pulled the door open and a rush of stale air hit her. The stairs descended into darkness, like a hungry maw waiting to swallow them whole. Behind them, the laughter grew louder, then shifted into a snarl that turned her stomach. Time seemed to stretch painfully, each second infused with the weight of dread. "Let us go," Lisa urged, her voice now edged with urgency. "Hurry." They stumbled down the steps, the light above fading until the door creaked ominously shut with a bang. The absence of light was obliterating, swallowing their last breath of safety. Each step sounded louder than thunder in the silence, reverberating into the chilling void. "Mommy, I can't see," Jake cried, his small voice echoing worry. "Just hold my hand tight," Sarah snapped, fear clawing at her throat. It was dark enough to feel the weight of it suffocating them. Sarah whispered words, trying to assure them both, but what could drive away the encroaching shadows? What could she even say to comfort someone when her own heart was filled with terror? A faint light flickered ahead, a promise of something, anything, but it felt tainted by the laughter creeping through the stillness. "Mommy!" Jake's voice was now a panicked shriek. "They're coming." The shadows were closer now, a mass of swirling dread charging toward them, every breath stung with fear. And then came the laughter again, echoing in the shadows, weaving through their very souls. "Sarah!" Lisa yelled, pulling her attention. "We need to split up. I'll find the journal, you protect Jake." "No!" Sarah shouted, the urgency of it tearing through her. "We stick together." But before she could take a step, Lisa disappeared deep into the darkness, shadows licking at her heels. Sarah and Jake stood frozen, dread coiling tightly around them, while the madness closed in. What would they find if they proceeded through the lingering gloom? And could they survive the madness waiting just beyond the edge of light? The basement air was thick, cold, almost liquid in its darkness, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. Sarah's heart raced, a frantic drumbeat in the silence, while Jake clung to her for dear life. The glow of the flickering light ahead danced like a cruel invitation, and the laughter from above continued to echo in hushed mockery. "Sarah?" Jake's voice quivered, breaking the oppressive quiet. "Where did she go?" "Shoo," she hissed, forcing her own fear down. "We have to keep moving." The shadows separated around them, shifting and twisting like fog, and she feared Lisa's choice may have sealed their fate. Every muscle screamed for her to run, but she gritted her teeth and pressed forward. "Just hold my hand." The warmth of Jake's little fingers didn't quell her rising terror. Instead, it reminded her of how fragile their situation was. They stumbled deeper into the darkness. The flicker of light ahead revealed jagged shadows that stretched menacingly, pulling her gaze toward a corner. Jagged shelves lined the walls, filled with dust-covered remnants of forgotten lives. Old records, dusty books, decaying furniture all seemed to whisper secrets long buried. "Look!" Jake squeaked. "What's that?" He pointed to a dark shape nestled between a tattered curtain and the wall. ignoring the fact that the basement did indeed resemble her living nightmares. Sarah approached cautiously. As they neared, the flickering light illuminated some type of bound book, its cover cracked and peeling. "The journal," she murmured, the glimmer of hope palpable in her throat. She reached for it, her fingers brushing against the weathered leather. The moment she touched it, a jolt shot through her, icy fingers wrapping around her wrist as if something else sought to hold the book. She gasped, jerking her hand back. "Mommy?" Jake whimpered, eyes wide. "It's nothing," she lied, though a shiver snaked down her spine. The moment was broken by a shifting sound, a scrape against the floor, deliberate and slow, echoing off the walls. "Stay close," she commanded, heart racing. But it felt too late, something had already breached their space. From the darkness, a figure began to take shape, tall and thin, clothed in shadow, its face an omitted detail. The laughter morphed. It turned guttural, deep, like 1,000 voices slithering together. "Sarah," the entity rasped, its tone twisted. "Leave the child, the darkness hungers, get back." Sarah shouted, stepping protectively in front of Jake. Panic surged, churning in her stomach. "You want to take him." The shadow paused, the laughter trickling into dark silence. An unnerving stillness overshadowed them, as if the air suddenly felt wrong. "Only the fearful survive," it hissed, dropping an icy chill that sliced through Sarah's resolve. "Mommy!" Jake cried, his grip tightening. "What does it want?" Her mind raced back to Lisa's words. The secrets the book had to hold answers. She licked her dry lips, forcing herself to focus. "This journal, it might have a way to fight this, whatever it is. What if it doesn't?" Jake whimpered, fear shattering the tenuous grip of courage she tried to maintain. "There's no choice, Jake," she replied, voice steely despite her fear. "We can't give in, not now." The entity shifted, a glimmer of malice illuminating its non-features. "Your decisions will seal your fate, choose wisely." Heart pounding, Sarah gripped the journal and tore it free from its resting place. The laughter tore through the basement, a cacophony of dread that spun around them like a tornado. She clutched Jake's hand tighter, unwilling to let go. "I'll read it," Jake urged, eyes lit with an innocent kind of determination. But before Sarah could answer, the shadows lurched forward, brushing against her, tightening their grip around the two of them. "Turn back before it's too late." "The darkness remembers," it hissed. Sarah edged backward, the journal tight against her chest. But as she turned, the door at the top of the stairs suddenly slammed open, a gust of wind whipping through the basement, extinguishing the flickering light. "Go now," the entity growled from within the blackness. "Or be consumed." With senses heightened to a near panic, Sarah shouted, "We need to find a way out, now." But as they pulled away from the shadows, she realized the way they came was no longer there. The stairs were gone, sealed tight by some unseen force. Now, they faced a new horror, trapped with whatever approached from the depth of black. What new terror awaited them as they stood alone beneath the ground, and was the journal their salvation or their doom? The darkness thickened around Sarah and Jake like a living thing, wrapping around them, leaving no room for escape. Sarah's heart raced, pumping adrenaline through her veins. She felt it, the overwhelming dread, the weight of the shadows creeping closer, as if gathering to strike. "Mommy!" Jake's voice was now tiny, tremulous, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence. The panic was like a flame igniting her confusion. She understood now, as the weight of the journal grew colder against her chest. It wasn't a simple book. It was a key, or perhaps a curse itself. "Stay quiet, Jake. We need to listen," she breathed, scanning the darkness beyond the oppressive shadow. The laughter was gone, but the air was electric with malice. And then, from the depths of that darkness, came a sound like fingernails dragging across metal, a sharp, eerie scratch. "Do you hear that?" He nodded, his eyes wide, reflecting the moonlight that somehow managed to seep through a crack that seemed out of place in the suffocating black. Suddenly, the entity spoke again, its voice curling into the recesses of her mind. Endless choices await you, Sarah. Let us go. She shouted, her voice trembling but determined. Only if you discover the truth hidden within, it whispered, the shadows around them writhing with sinister delight. The thought was almost unbearable. What truth? The journal pressed heavily against her side, demanding to be opened. The floor trembled beneath them, cold and unwelcoming. Mommy, I'm scared, Jake whispered, inching closer, eyes darting to every sound. In that moment, Sarah made her choice. We need to open it, Jake. There may be something we can use. The moment her fingers brushed the leather cover, a wave of cold washed over her, an overwhelming sensation, as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Jake gasped, Mommy, I don't think we should. Trust me, she said, squeezing his hand tighter. She opened the journal, its pages crackling like old parchment. At first, the handwriting was faded, but a sudden gust of wind swept through the basement, snapping the pages to a section where the words sprang out, almost luminous in the darkness. The darkness thirsts for fear. A child holds the secret, she read aloud, an icy chill settling in her bones. Follow the echo, but beware the shadows they cast. Echo? Shadows? Panic twisted in her gut. They needed to do something. We need to follow the echo. But just as she spoke, intense shuddering began, rattling the shelves around them. The shelves trembled, their contents threatening to tumble down. Mommy! Jake shrieked, fear bubbling in his voice as he squeezed her hand. The shadows, they're moving. Stay close. She shouted, feeling the energy of the room shift. The shadows loomed larger, writhing, intertwining like serpents. They groaned and fell back momentarily, creating a narrow path leading deeper into the abyss. Come on! She urged. With every step, shadows coiled around them, the entity's laughter returning, echoing through their minds. It felt as if they were moving away from reality, wrestling through a nightmare. The dark whispers swirled around them like smoke, the child's sacrifices must be made. Shut up. Sarah screamed, forcing her legs to move. They stumbled into the deeper darkness, an unnerving quiet replacing the laughter, only the sound of their hurried breaths remained, then she heard it, a soft echo. A voice, familiar yet distorted. Mommy, help, it was Lisa. The realization hit hard like a punch to the gut. We have to find her. Jake cried, anxiety flaring in his eyes. But as they pressed onward, the shadows clung tighter. The whispering deepened. Sacrifices must be made, trapped in a sinister game of darkness. What was lurking beyond the next shadow? And would their choices seal their fate, or lead them to salvation? Shivers danced along Sarah's spine as she raced through the dark, dragging Jake behind her. Shadows swirled, tantalizing at the edges of her vision, taunting her to stop, to turn back. But she couldn't let whatever malevolent force was lurking in the darkness take them. Not when hope echoed out like a lifeline. Mommy, I can't see. Jake whimpered, clinging to her like a barnacle. His grip tightened, nails digging into her palm. Just stay close. She urged, trembling but determined. We're almost there. The word there felt hollow, an empty promise against the overwhelming uncertainty pressing in on them. Creeping forward, the darkness thickened with each passing step. It felt alive, pulsing, breathing. Sarah's heart raced, battering against her ribcage like a trapped bird. The whispering grew louder, wrapping around her mind, almost discernible now. Follow the echo, it hissed, a sinister symphony of voices layered over one another. Suddenly, the shadows rippled, parting to reveal an open space bathed in a sickly gray glow. The basement's floor opened up into an expansive chamber, walls lined with strange writings etched into stone. Arrayed around a central altar were old, cracked dolls, their eyes wide and empty, long forgotten. Look, Mommy. Jake pointed shakily. The altar looked like it belonged to some twisted ritual. What are they doing here? I don't know. "We need to find Lisa," Sarah replied sharply, her throat dry with fear. The altar loomed ominously, a magnet drawing her closer despite her instincts to flee. As they approached, unease washed over her. She felt behind each carving a story of despair. And then she heard it. The echo, Lisa's voice drifting from deep within the chamber. "Mommy, please come, Lisa." The name tore from Sarah's lips. Panic clawed at her gut, and she quickly turned toward the sound. But before she could move, the shadows coiled tighter around them. A guttural growl vibrated through the air, sending prickles skittering along her skin. "You must choose or be consumed." A fear so profound gripped her heart that she almost didn't notice the flickering light along the altar's edge. It pulsed softly, coaxing her to step closer. She hesitated, her mind battling against the dread wrapping around her thoughts. "Mommy, don't. It's not safe," Jake cried, straining against her grip as if sensing the malevolence emanating from the altar. With a shaky breath, Sarah set her jaw. "We need to know." She reached for the light, half expecting a burst of heat, but instead, it enveloped her like a caress. The darkness shifted, pulling away as if afraid of the light. But she felt that something was changing, revealing secrets hidden in the gloom. "What is it?" Jake whispered, gazing wide-eyed, trying to catch a glimpse. Words swirled before her, pulled from the heart of the journal. "The first sacrifice is fear," the mantra echoed, slicing through the dread. It pushed her deeper into uncertainty, forcing her to confront what she had kept buried. "Is it our fear?" she asked, feeling the weight of her mother's fears, the ones that had haunted her through sleepless nights. "No, it can't be." Suddenly, the laughter returned. It mixed with Jake's sobs as the shadows crept toward them again. They were not done yet. The darkness was hungry, as if feeding on the very essence of their desperation. In a terrifying moment of clarity, Sarah realized, to save Lisa, she would have to strip down her own fears, face them head-on. She swallowed hard. "Jake, stay right here. I have to do this." As she stepped toward the pulsing light, everything in her screamed to turn and run. But Lisa's voice erupted through the chamber again. "Help me, Mommy. What's the choice?" she shouted into the void. "What do I have to sacrifice?" But the answer was drowned by a sharp, sudden silence, the shadows holding their breath. From the edge of her vision, she noticed the dolls on the altar turn slightly, twisting their heads, a terrible realization wrapping around her heart. Was this what they sought? A game of horror meant to ensnare her? Then, almost imperceptibly, the shadowy figures moved in closer, desperate to feast on her misery. "Mom!" Jake shrieked, the shadows threatening to engulf them. Sarah's breath hitched. There was no going back. What would the darkness demand? When she reached out, a crack in the air split her vision. She had to make the choice. Or would it choose for her? As shadows pressed on every side, an image fluttered past her mind. A vision of laughter, of Lisa's bright smile stark against the backdrop of despair, and then moonlight pierced through. A choice had to be made. What horrors would it unleash? What was waiting in the depths of darkness? "Help us!" Sarah screamed, gripping the altar as the darkness surged and swelled. And in those blinding moments, a sinister voice whispered back, promising salvation, yet begging for destruction. What awaited them next? Was it deliverance, pain, or an unspeakable terror lurking in that decision? The silence shattered abruptly, splitting the air like glass. Sarah felt the rush of panic coursing through her veins, electrifying every nerve. She froze, hanging onto the altar as if it were her last tether to reality. Shadows swirled aggressively around her, as if the very essence of dread was alive, clawing at the edges of her sanity. "Mommy, help!" Lisa's voice echoed again, a ghostly whisper that warred with the chaos in Sarah's mind. It pulled at her, tugging her heart deeper into the dark. "Please, just a little closer." The shadows writhed and hissed, threatening to snuff out that flicker of hope. The altar's light pulsed again, almost teasingly, like a heartbeat encouraging her to make her move. Her grip tightened on Jake, fear tightening like a vice around her chest. "Mommy, I'm scared." Jake whimpered, eyes wide, struggling against her hold. "I know, sweetie, I'm scared too." Her voice trembled, but she forced it through the haze of panic. "But we can't leave Lisa." The pulsing light beckoned her, revealing more whispers, snippets of the past entwined with the present. "Sacrifice your love, your greatest fear holds the key." The words twisted her stomach as realization crept in. No, it can't be. Dread filled her, cold and heavy, making her limbs feel leaden. To face her fear. "Mommy, don't listen. We can just go." Jake pleaded, his voice cracking, eyes darting between the shadowy tendrils and the altar. Sarah's heart thundered in her ears, but another surge of desperation clawed at her. "I can't. Not without her." This wasn't just about survival anymore. The stakes were higher, and it choked her with every breath, and just like that, the room shifted. She felt the temperature drop drastically, her breath releasing misty clouds in the frigid air. The shadows were closing in, their growls rumbling ominously as if the walls themselves were closing in. Suddenly, the dolls on the altar shifted, their cracked mouths stretching into sinister grins, and the laughter erupted again. It wasn't just laughter, it was a twisted cacophony of screams mixed with giggles, a choir of madness that whispered promises of everything she had ever feared. "Face them," the voice urged. "Only then will she be saved." "No!" Jake screamed, eyes wide with raw terror. The shadows roared, and a wave of darkness surged toward them, cold and suffocating. In that moment, Sarah felt something stir within her. The memories flooded her mind, her deepest regrets, the haunting echoes of abandonment and guilt, the shadows that lived in her imagination since childhood. The twisted parade of moments that carved terror into her soul. "Fear is the path to freedom." The voice slithered through the chamber, coaxing her to surrender. Could it be true? Did she dare confront the shadows of her past? "Mommy!" Jake tugged hard at her arms. "Run!" "No, I can't do that. I have to save her." Taking a deep breath, she shifted her stance, grounding herself with fierce determination. "I choose to face you." The shadows curled back, deforming like a retreating tide, their growls turning into high-pitched wails. But the dolls seemed to react, their laughter intensifying, drowning the room. She stepped closer to the light, feeling the pull of the memories, each fear heavier than the last. She had hidden them for too long, buried them deep, but now their faces emerged, every nightmare unwound, every loss replayed. "Lisa, I'm coming." As she surrendered to the storm of emotions, the shadows lunged, taking shape as twisted versions of her own fears. They reached for her, snaking fingers that shimmered with malicious intent. In that split second, time froze. The altar's light flickered uncertainly, pulsing like a heart torn between life and death. Then she understood, to save Lisa, she must embrace the shadows, not flee them. She felt her past, its cold touch, its aching familiarity, and she screamed into the chaos, "No more." But the end was only the beginning. The shadows screeched louder, a deafening roar that shook the marrow in her bones. The chamber rippled, blurring reality, and in that twisting moment, nothing would be the same. What would this act of defiance unleash? As silence fell once again, their true challenge lurked just beyond the veil, waiting to know, could she survive the deepest, darkest recesses of her own soul? The moment her voice pierced the air, the chamber erupted into an orchestra of screams that twisted like blades. Shadows reformed, snarling and whining, shifting into grotesque figures reminiscent of her past. Each dark shape carried the weight of her failures, regrets, and fears, and their eyes glowed with a horrific hunger. "Sarah!" Jake's plea wove through her fog of terror. "Don't let them take you." She gritted her teeth, desperation flooding her veins. "I want to lose you, Lisa. I want to let this end like it did before." She cried out, her heart pounding like a war drum. The words felt heavy and hollow, echoing with fear of a time she had buried deep. The shadows swirled closer, shapes pushing against one another like ravenous wolves. Each one whispered her secrets, making her squirm. Her hands trembled on the altar. Memories surged, the harsh words she snapped during late-night fights, the screams of a younger Lisa when Sarah was too wrapped up in her own worries to console her. Guilt washed over her like ice water. "No. I will not let you consume me," Sarah screamed, pushing through the pain, forcing her body to respond. It was as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff top, about to plunge into the black abyss. But then, she noticed something. In the back of her mind, buried under all the chaos, was a flicker and inkling of hope. "Face your fears," the golden light pulsed, even brighter now, illuminating the twisted figures. It was a beacon, daring her to reach out, to confront, to claim her power back. "Bring it on!" she roared as if challenging the shadows themselves. With that determination ignited, she stepped forward into the darkness. As she did, the figures lunged toward her, snarling. She felt their icy breath against her skin, their gnarled fingers curling around her ankle, trying to drag her back into the pit of despair. "Mommy!" Jake cried, his voice laced with terror. But she turned, fighting through the overwhelming dread, her spirit aflame with the will to protect her son and save her daughter. "I will not let you take us." What followed was an explosion of energy. She embraced her fears, refusing to yield to the pain. The twisted versions of her memories began to falter, flickering as the light swallowed them whole. One shadow, larger than the rest, loomed in front. This creature was the embodiment of her greatest regret, a figure resembling her sister, distorted and sorrowful, its face a mask of anguish. "I loved you. I couldn't save you," she bellowed, and it howled as a wave of clarity washed over her, memories flooding back the last time she saw her sister, the words they might never share again. But the shadow-esque grip tightened, and it whispered in a voice that clawed at her insides. "You chose your fears over your family, they will pay." Just then, the ground trembled violently. The altar beneath her began to fracture, cracks snaking outward like lines of lightning. The dolls erupted into chaos, shrieks of laughter mingling with cries of despair. Sarah felt the air grow heavy, saturated with the angry energy of all those fears she had denied. "No!" she shouted, as the shadows writhed and lunged, threatening to consume everything. Then, a violent rush tore through her, the power of anger and sorrow becoming solid in her chest. "I choose love. I choose them." She thrust her hands toward the shadows, feeling warmth swell like a sun igniting. It was all or nothing now. The chamber exploded in a blinding light, stretching and bending the fabric of reality. For an instant, time stood still. As darkness resumed its shape, Sarah was left gasping in the aftermath, her breath mingling with the thick darkness around her. The sense of impending doom loomed heavier than before, more ominous than ever. What had she awakened? A low growl came from the shadows, fierce and malevolent, and across the altar, a doorway opened wider than before, revealing a swirling abyss. Before she could react, the ground quaked again, and the chilling laugh of her fears echoed, beckoning her back. In that moment, the stitches of reality continued to unravel. What awaited on the other side of that door? Was it salvation or something far worse? Sarah stood at the edge of the chasm, the darkness swirling beneath her like a raging storm. The shadows hissed, their voices slithering into her ears with promises of despair, but the radiant glow of love for her children burned bright within her. She could not yield to this torment, their well-being depended on her determination. "Mommy!" Jake's voice trembled, yet it carried a thread of bravery. He stood firm, tethered to her, his small figure illuminated by the waning light. In that moment, determination surged through Sarah. This was her chance. The abyss roared, eager to snatch them into the folds of night. "You can't hide forever from the darkness," the shadows chanted, swirling hungrily. "It always knows no," she shouted, stepping closer to the void, willing herself to stand her ground. "You don't own us." Emboldened by Jake's presence, she pulled the journal from her side, feeling its weight pulse with energy. "We know your lies," she declared, unfurling the pages. The letters glowed, illuminating the grotesque figures that lurked in the obsidian depths. Thank God for the words inscribed within, for they were a weapon against this darkness. Darkness thrives on fear, but love is the remedy. The echo mingled with her rising voice, and she felt her power swell as she chanted the words from the journal. Fear not the shadows, let your heart guide you. The shadows writhed, their howls growing shrill as they recoiled from her resolve. You think you can escape? This ends now. Sarah surged forward, gripping Jake's hand with fierce desperation. The agony of her regrets washed over her like a tide. Her fears of abandonment, inadequacy, the image of her sister's ghostly visage taunted her. I won't let your past take my future, she roared, swallowing the sorrow that had weighed her down for far too long. In that moment, she stepped into the abyss, not with despair but with defiance. The air shimmered, and as she did, the oppressive darkness buckled. In a blinding flash of light, the chance of the shadows grew weaker. Around them, an ethereal glow exploded, illuminating the chamber, dispersing the fog. The cold hands of shadows loosened in panic. Mommy! Look! Jake pointed, his voice trembling, yet filled with childlike awe. A path opened amidst the chaos, each doll on the altar smiling, their features transforming as they changed from malevolent to benevolent. With her son's hand grasped in hers, love surged through Sarah like a roaring river. Together, they charged into the pulsating brilliance as the shadows collapsed behind them, howling in rage, finding themselves drawn back by the light. They raced through the radiant passage, fear and darkness receding into echoes, replaced by the sweet glow of freedom. We're escaping. Jake cheered, a lightness in his step. Hold on tight, baby. Sarah cried, fear still gently gnawing at her heart but swiftly fading with each step. The world around them brightened, colors bursting forth, bringing familiar scents and sensations that had been lost in the cries of nightmarish whispers. They surged through a tunnel of light, twisting and turning, drawing closer to the surface as sunbeams promise warm against their skin, and then, suddenly, they stumbled out into the cool night air of Elmsworth, the stars twinkling above like a constellation of hope. Gasps of terror dispersed, fading away as whispers turned into the sigh of leaves fluttering gently in the breeze. Around them, the quiet of normalcy wrapped them in its embrace, yet above them, something shimmered, a faint outline of what had been lurking within that dark abyss. But for now, they had emerged. Mommy, we did it. Jake squealed, bouncing on his feet, the innocence of a child illuminating through remnants of fear and shadow. Yes, we did. She said, pulling him into a tight embrace, savoring the moment where safety felt tangible, but a dull ache settled in her heart. What about Lisa? Jake's face faded momentarily, the memory of their search striking deep. We have to find her. Yes, Sarah agreed fiercely, determination like steel in her spine. Lisa had to be saved. As she turned back toward the abyss, that swelling sense of fear tugging at her heart, she knew the true journey had only just begun. Hope thrummed in the air, it was bittersweet, but it was there. Together, she said softly, looking at Jake, and the stars twinkled above, echoing the promise of tomorrow, a terrifying adventure leaning on the horizon. The night stretched on, waiting for their next move, and with that, the shadow of the asylum loomed behind them, a testament to the battle fought, but not yet won, and so Sarah stood tall, ready for whatever lay ahead, the strength of her love solidifying the path beneath her feet. But the echoes of the asylum still whispered across the wind. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and let everyone know what you think. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion fight the shadows of the unknown together.